All right, guys, welcome to today's call. Today's day 7, a 7-day fast start. And so today's the cherry on top of the whole thing, which is basically scaling and optimizing, right? And so if you're at this point, that means, your offer works. You have you have your economics figured out. You got your model architected. You have your market picked. You have your super idea. I mean, super idea. That's funny. You have your superpower figured out. You have your disruptive idea dialed in. Your acquisition offer works, like you're getting customers. You have the awareness bridge, and basically you're putting people into the back end. And, you got your first, 1,000 customers, and then you got your first 10 back end deals. And so, you want to go scale and optimize, right? Basically run the offer and, make more money. So one of the biggest things about scaling is that most people out there look at it one dimensionally, right? So next slide, please, Robert. And what they don't realize, everybody when they scale an offer, they think, just because I turn this up, then money comes up, right? Like money, which is true in most cases, right? More money does come in. But at the same time, when you scale, everything else scales, right? So customer support scales, your payment processing load scales, your community scales, your load on your time scales, everything increases, right? And so you have to be aware of this. Otherwise, you can't really sustain scaling. And it's going to collapse on itself. And I'm speaking from experience because I built a lot of offers with just scaling one component of it, which is just sales, and then not really thinking about the rest of the components that scale. And then when the rest of the components scale, the whole house falls apart, right? So you really have to kind of build a deep foundation, infrastructure, and everything when it comes to scaling. Because just turning up ad spend, can cause issues actually. So. Next up is pace your scaling of your offer. Make weekly decisions, not daily decisions. So most people, when they scale their offer, we talked about this, I think maybe on day 4 or 3, I can't remember, one of these days, right? But the concept of, subjective and objective data, right? And so scaling is all about just looking at data and finding meaning in data, right? So ultimately, when you scaling, you're basically looking at, the analytics nonstop, right? And you're looking at the stats. Okay, this is happening, that's happening. But you have to connect those analytics and stats back to your bank account, right? And so, for example, for me, like when I'm looking at the automatic clients offer, I'm looking at the Facebook analytics and stats, and then I'm looking at the Stripe account, right? I'm seeing how that connects, right? And trying to find patterns, what's going on, right? And so the reason I say that's really important is because most people, when they look at data, they it's subjective because their feelings are subjected to their feelings and how they feel and their moods and their biases and stuff like that. And so they make irrational decisions on that offer and change things too soon, too fast, and then things just don't work, right? You have to make objective decisions. You have to move your feelings and your biases and everything, your fears, your concerns out of the decision factor, right? And that's why you have to look at everything on a weekly basis, not daily decisions. Like the Facebook algorithm is I'm not, Robert, are you recording this on your end?
Yeah,
Screen?
I'm recording
Okay.
my screen and the voice. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, Robert's recording, guys. So I forgot to hit record here, so that's fine. Ooh, boy, that was a close one. All right, so what was I saying? Yeah, and hey,
I never have tech issues.
well, that's a human error. That's not a computer error. But so anyway, so basically, like what ends up happening is like if you look at daily stats, daily data, right? So in the keyword centric era of years gone by, right? Like if you're running ads on, say, Google, whatever, and you're bidding on a keyword dog training, you can see that keyword performance on a daily basis. So you can make daily decisions because it's a supply, demand, and intent, right? Basically, those three elements dictated the performance, right? And that's gonna be like within bounds of like say 80% accuracy, right? You have 20% kind of variance, but it's pretty steady, right? But now we're living in this like AI, artificial intelligence algorithms that kind of like move, like they just move dynamically all the time, right? And it's really hard to pinpoint it. And so what ends up happening, for example, if you're running ads on Facebook, right, Facebook buckets people indifferently based on the social graph, right? And so like if you're running ads to this bucket, today you might, double, triple, quadruple your money, and tomorrow you might lose, right? But if you look at the average of 2 days, you're actually profitable, right? And so if you're making decisions on a daily basis, right, then that really wrecks you because like, for example, there's this pattern always if you run traffic, one day you'll always have like 1 or 2 low days and you'll have 1 or 2 high days, right? So when I was running a supplement company, I think like my low day was Tuesday, right? Like Tuesday, basically like it was just like the conversions, and it just wasn't good, right? And so when I saw that pattern, I basically just said, okay, screw Tuesday. We're going to, like minimize the budget Tuesday and then double the budget Saturday, because Saturday was a high day, right? And then on Saturdays, we basically just, made way more money. And so that happens as well on Facebook. The problem with Facebook and such is like, if you lower a Tuesday, then it might affect what really happens Saturday because of this fluidity. It's not connected to keywords anymore, right? It's all like this, like a social graph intent. And so the reason for that, I say, make weekly decisions is because you want to look at a weekly at an aggregate, right? It's better even if you look at a monthly if you can sustain it, right? And so when you're scaling, you shouldn't really, a lot of people come and, I'm guilty of this more than anybody, is I'll come in and basically like see like, oh, it's doing well, let's, triple the budget like the same day, right? But it's wise for you to triple the, budget if you're going to triple it, to increase the budget on a weekly basis, not necessarily, on a daily basis. And so what you want to do is you want to basically look at week-to-week stats and then look at everything as a whole, right? You want to look at, your front-end sales, your upsells, your downsells, your refund rate, look at the genders. Like, for example, is it mostly men buying? Is it mostly women? What age brackets are buying? What geolocation is, are they coming from? And then you can even look at like, for example, if you're running like a weight loss offer, some states are more overweight than others. So like New Yorkers tend to be very healthy because they walk a lot, right? So weight loss offer might not do as well in New York, but in Texas, it might do really well. Some of these southern states where we like to eat. So you got to look at the data. So basically scaling is all about just living and looking at data all the time and resisting two things. You're resisting your subjective, looking at data subjectively, meaning like freaking out, right? Two, and then also resisting fucking with it, right? And so what I mean by fucking with it, we have a lot of people that come into our accelerator, to come into a program, right? And so we give them the whole thing. We say, here's the, here's the sales copy, here's this, here's the ads, here's the targeting. We give them everything, right? Basically. And then like, there's this thing where, some, right? Like, so in NLP, it's called, sameness with a difference, right? Or difference. And so sameness with a difference means like, somebody likes to do something the same, but with the difference, they like to change like 10%, or they like to improve it, right? And so they'll come in and they'll change that 10%, but the 10% they change screws everything up, and then it stops working, right? So when we work with people and we give them everything and they come back to us, this is not working, the only thing I look for, okay, what did you change? You changed something. And like 9 times out of 10, they change something. I'm like, put it back. They put it back and it works, right? So have these two guys from Belgium, they did that. The offer didn't really work well. We fixed it. They messaged me this morning and they're having like a, $64 cart value, so it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It works. So that's basically, when it comes to scaling, that's kind of like the nutshell of looking at, the big picture of how to do it, right? So next slide, Robert.
Yeah,
So,
let me just add something on there. So a couple of things. I think the one thing just kind of on a fundamental level, it's like there's a lot of, and Alan kind of touched on this, but like there's a lot of delusion. It's like people come in and they make, 10 sales, but their budget is so low that their average order value is quite good. Their cost per, CPA, cost per acquisition is very low. And so they just assume that even if they 10x or 100x the budget, that everything's going to stay the same. But that's just not how it works in the real world. So this all comes back to what Alan said in the beginning, which is that when you scale, everything scales. So yes, you're going to make more sales, but yes, your refunds are going to scale. Yes, like all the bad stuff is going to scale. How much time you have to put in, and like all these things scale, right? So there's like a lot of delusion going into this idea of scaling because people only see the good side of it. So that's important. And I think also on a fundamental level, when it comes to optimizing, the mindset is very much like, and again, this is something Alan touched on. This is kind of like an higher viewpoint of it, which is that let's find out what's not working so we can stop doing it. That's how I approach it. So which age groups are not working, which gender is not working, which countries are not working, and all of these things. And the thing that comes back to this is the thing that's going to help you do all this is tracking. This is another thing that I think kind of plays into, it's not even delusion at that point, it's just being naive. So one of the things that you find is if you go from running like a 5-figure business or like a 6-figure business, and then you try to, put your big boy pants on and go into bigger territory, what you'll find is people are a little bit naive sometimes, and they don't realize all of the things that come with that. And so tracking is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important. Because like Alan said, subjective and objective data, it's very much data-driven decision-making, but if you don't have the right data, then you're going to be making subjective decisions, even though even though you're not aware of it. So that's incredibly important. So, one of the things that we recently did, you guys might have heard that there's some changes happening to iOS 14 and how Apple is now giving the user sort of extra privacy controls that they didn't have before, which is affecting the tracking of Facebook ads, Google ads, all of the advertising, LinkedIn ads, because of privacy issues. So what happens then is the tracking gets all wonky. So then there's companies popping up that instead of relying on Facebook's fingerprinting, it's called, they have their own third-party fingerprinting software, which allows you to actually do proper tracking. So there's like a new need that's popped up for this thing. And now that you have that, and now that we have that, and we have way more control, we can actually see what a big difference that makes. Because as you start making, let's say you're selling $5 books on the front end, and then you have these $6,500 consulting programs on the back end or whatever. If you just miss one or two of those high ticket sales, as far as attributing them to the right ad in your ad account is going to tell you that ad is underperforming, that you need to shut it off. But you need that data, because if you actually had the data, you would see that it was extremely profitable. You could have missed out on, an ad that was producing $13K a day or a week or a month or whatever. So that's another thing that's like, if you want to pull your big boy pants up, like tracking is something you have to get very, very serious about and really start to think about. And the other thing, this is also just to further elaborate on what Alan said about, fucking with stuff too much. So one of the thing is Facebook is like a sleeping baby. For those of you parents out there, I'm sure most of us have at some point had our baby, sleeping in a stroller or whatever, and then like, oh, maybe I need to move them to the crib or whatever. You just have some dumb idea that ends up with the baby waking up, and you would have had 30 minutes rest, and now the baby is up and you gotta take care of them, which we all know, if we're parents, how exhausting that can be. Facebook is the same, right? You can't change your budget twice a day or 3 times a day, or like start messing with the targeting, or like going in it. Like, you have to just make your decisions based on the data, and then you got to sit back for like a couple of days, maybe even a week, before you do anything. So very, very important stuff. And with that, let's continue which is also, what's up?
Let me add one more thing to the previous thing. It's really important, right? So most people, like when they scale, they'll look at that. You have to look at everything in duality. Like everything has cause and effect. Two sides to it. Like black and white, light and dark, etc. Right? Blue and red. And so when you're running ads, right? Like as Robert pointed out, it's like you want to look at what's not working. Like the thing is really, like if you look at it, like the people that give you money, right, that buy your stuff, they don't cost you anything because they're paying for themselves. It's really that all the other people that don't buy your stuff that's actually costing you money, right? And so the game is to figure out either how to convert those people that don't give you money into giving you money, or get rid of them, right? That's basically all that is, right? So next up is it's all about scaling in the right direction. And this is really important, because what ends up happening is, like when you're running offers and ads, you have what I call runaway demographics, right? And so, for example, like, if you go into Facebook, you do a campaign, ad set, and you put a bunch of ads. If you don't have like a limited budget per each ad to do a test, like Facebook will just allocate the budget to the ad that just seems to, work best, right? And because they that's all they care about, because they just want more money to come through for them, right? And so what happens is, like, you basically burn your budget, but also at the same time, it's like very few people ever sit down and think about, the end point of their business. Meaning, like, okay, let's say I do grow this thing to 10, 20 million a year, or $1 million a year, whatever your number is. What does that look like, right? What does that look like? Who are the people in the business? Who am I working with? What's my day look like? What am I doing to enjoy it, etc.? Instead, what ends up happening is, like, they just like pop an offer, and then like a certain segment of the people will end up buying the offer, and then that's just kind of like where the money's made, and then the business, scales by itself, but it doesn't scale in the right direction. And so the right direction is, like, you have to choose where to scale it, right? And so for example, a lot of offers out there in this space, build a business entrepreneur space, they're not discriminating at all, in the sense of, like, they're attracting people to them that, ultimately shouldn't be attracted to them. Like, for example, if somebody's, not a long-term good prospect. So for example, like, let's say you have an offer, I'll use one of our offers as an example. We ran this offer called 2 Hour Agency, right? And, good offer, good conversions and everything. But then, like, what ended up happening is, like, it attracted a lot of people who didn't want to work, right? So 2-hour agency, of course, right? And so what that means, like if you attract people who don't want to work, that means inherently like long-term value of them isn't high, right? And so because like, if they don't want to work, then their earning
hard
capacity,
to get them results.
Yeah, it's their earning capacity is lowered, hard to get them results, hard to move them, whatever, right? They're move away. They're people that like to move away from pain, right? And so if you're about like, let's get you results over here, which is towards pleasure, then it's like, well, that doesn't really work, right? So like, we sold a lot of those books, I think like 12, 13,000 books, but it was fine, it was fine, but it's basically like, scaling in the wrong direction. You're building this thing just because it works doesn't mean you should do it, right? Like you can make money 50 different ways, but like you should be really cognizant of how you do it and where that, who you attract in your business, right? Because what you get on the front is what you get on the back, and then what you get long term, right? Because people's behaviors generally don't change. They're kind of cemented when they're about like 5 to 7 years old. And so I think like at 10 years old, it's like end point. It's like, okay, who you are is who you are based at 10, and you just kind of like morphing version of that. And so if you get a whole bunch of people in one type of business, that you didn't really think through, it's like, that's not good, that's not good. And then you just end up with a business that makes a lot of money, but that's about it, nothing else matters, and so be really cognizant of that. So let's hop on to the next slide, unless you have something to add here.
All good.
All right, so this is a big one, right? So you don't need authority to scale because of economics, right? And so one of the things is like we live in this world, in this society where, we wait for people to anoint other people, right? In a sense of like, let's say, for example, let me think, like you go to school and you get a, college, high school degree, right? Okay, this is the school system anoints you that you passed, right? Then you go to college and the college gives you this thing, right? And then if you look at like even like musicians and that it's like you have this one artist and now he's featured on this other artist, and that artist basically, like for example, Lil Wayne, right? Like the rapper Lil Wayne, he was rapping, and then like he had Drake on one of his things, and then he basically gave permission to Drake to be great, right, etc. So the thing is, that era is dead, it's dying slowly. Like you don't need authority, right, to do that. You don't need to be an authority. Nobody needs to know about you and nothing, because if you think about society and how it works, like how is fame architected? How do you create fame, right? And basically, like for example, I'll use an example of The Rock. What's his real name?
Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, Dwayne Johnson, right? So he's like in everything, right? He's like, he's like on a bag of chips. He's on like 15 different TV shows. He's on like every movie. It's just on everything, right? But if you look at Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock, his fame is largely due to the economics behind the marketing of those products that he was in, right? So for example, if he's in a movie, I don't know what movie. It's funny because I can't think of a movie he was in, but I've seen a lot of his movie. Oh yeah, Fast and Furious, right? So like Fast and Furious, like he was in it, right? Well, it wasn't him that made the movie. It was like the economic engine, like basically the people that were paid to write the scripts, all the supporting cast, the costume designers, people, the director that was paid to do that,
the 5 or 6 Fast and Furious movies before he joined, like those things.
Yeah, everything, yeah, exactly. And then you had the studio behind him who basically said, "Here's $200 million. We're gonna make this thing and turn it into $1 billion, through licensing deals and whatever, global sales of movie tickets, etc." Right? So you have this massive economic engine, and then you have The Rock come and he does like a very small percentage of the work, like maybe like 0.01%, right? He does that, and then basically people are like, oh, he's famous. Well, it's like, of course, it's like if you put anybody in that role, they'll be famous. It's not that hard, right? Once you have the economic engine. And so so authority is completely irrelevant, right? But then a lot of us, like when we see like people like gurus out there, like very famous gurus running it, they have a sense of authority, and we're like, we can't do that. Well, it's like, why can't you do that? Because Facebook doesn't care if where the dollar comes from. They don't care if it's your dollar, my dollar, or somebody's famous dollar. It's like they don't give a shit. It's like a dollar's a dollar to them. They'll take everything, right? And so you can run out there and compete with anybody if your economics are architected right. Meaning if you can build a model or a system where predictably people give you money, and then you can use that money to acquire more customers, right? So for example, if everybody in the market is spending $20 a customer, right? And I come in there and I say, you know what, I'm here Facebook, here's $100 a customer, right? Now I can take all the customers because I can be everywhere all the time. Every single ad placement, 24/7, all the location, countries, and targeting that like they probably couldn't. And the algorithm will, stretch its legs and take me to very far lands and help me get customers where, other people can't advertise because, their budgets won't allow them, right? And so what ends up happening is like once you build an economic engine behind whatever you're doing, your business, You kind of supersede authority and you become an authority, right? So it's like, it's not authority that builds a business, it's the economics that builds the authority, right? And so that's a really, really big thing to think about. So next up, unless you have something to add, Robert.
Yeah, I do have something to add to this. So I thought about this a lot. So there's this saying in our culture, right, which is generally accepted and just kind of builds on what Alan's been saying, which is that first impressions matter a lot, right? First impressions are very important. And then if you think about that, it's like, why are first impressions important? It's because usually before the internet, you could only meet somebody, a handful of times or whatever. Like you weren't able to get in front of them more than X amount of times because all you had was your own self and you being there in person. And so when you met somebody, the impression mattered because that's what they were going to think about you forever, unless you were able to change their mind. With the internet, you can actually change people's minds. Like there's a lot of people out there that just, you take somebody like Gary Vee, right? He turns a lot of people off because of how aggressive he is and, the way that he speaks and whatnot. But like, I don't know him. I've met him, but he seems like probably a nice guy, He's one of those people who's like, you can't really hate on him if you really kind of understood what he was about. And so the value of the first impression, in my opinion, has gone down because you can actually get in front of people now if you have an economic engine. So even though people might not love you at first sight, if you're genuinely there to help them, then you can get in front of them with your advertising. And eventually, if you help them, they're going to change their mind about you. So I think this is really important. And it's really sort of, like Alan said, like nobody has to put you on anymore. Like if you just listen to what we say in Automatic Clients and build this model, you're going to have an economic engine to do whatever you want. You might not want the attention and whatnot, but if you want it, you can go out there and get it, and you can build a business around you, or you can build a business around your software company, and you can just use this model to do so. So it's very cool because all of us now have the power to go out there and do these things. And if you look around, I mean, there's a lot of people that are literally mainstream famous now that just did it on their own. You take somebody like Casey Neistat, like he's really famous. And I watched one of his videos and he was like hanging out with Will Smith. And most of the people, they met up with a group of people, and most of the people were clinging on to Casey Neistat, who's just this YouTuber. And then Will Smith is, worldwide movie star, but he was just not as important anymore because, the Casey Neistat was able to build his own audience and whatnot. Now, he didn't even use money for it. He was able to get attention on YouTube by using, his creativity. But the point remains is that the power is now in each individual, which is super, super cool. So, Alan, as you scale, your system has to be load-bearing, otherwise it will collapse. We did kind of touch on this, but anything to add?
Yeah, so I mean, every ecosystem can support like a certain amount of weight, right? So for example, like, if you live in an area and they build too many apartments, the roads can only support so much, before they start collapsing, right? So even your business, like, the thing is like we're moving digital bits versus atoms, so it's a lot easier, but like, you got to look at like your load bearing as far as you scale. Like, for example, is it customer service? Is it, customer success? Is it customer interaction? Is it like answering support tickets? Is it replying to people when they get in touch with you? So you really have to be cognizant of like where's the load bearing weak point in your model, and when you scale, and then you got to kind of like focus on fixing that before you keep scaling. Otherwise, once it collapses, it'll bring everything else down. So that's kind of like that. We touched upon it earlier prematurely. So let's hop on to the next slide.
Yep. I'll kind of touch on this, and you can go for it if you want.
Yeah, it's fine. So everything has an actual and perceived value. Like only one of them can be manipulated. So basically, like actual value isn't negotiable. Perceived value can be amplified, right? And so basically, what that means is actual value is like the things they get. So for example, you coming in here and like was doing a 7-day fast, start going all out, not holding anything back, being very raw, and just uncut, right? Not filtered, right? Like, here's what you guys need to do this to become successful, and we're not going to sugarcoat this or whatever, and this is how it is, right? Versus, for example, like, if we take the actual value and we try to sugarcoat it and say, well, you got to give us, $20,000 to get this stuff, sorry, and then we kind of put some bullshit in front of you. That's kind of like manipulating actual value, but you can't really negotiate actual value. Actual value is what they get after they pay, right? So, but perceived value can be amplified, right? And so perceived value is like the perception of the value. And so like when people perceive something that can be valuable or invaluable to them, right? So for example, it can be like, let's say you have an offer running out there, and based on how much it solves their problem, that perception can be altered, but the actual value can't. And so one of the things we say is like, marketing, meeting needs versus fulfilling needs, right? And so marketing is a component that basically meets the customer's needs. Like our book met you on an ad and met your need, right? Hey, meet the need, right? But then after you buy it and everything, it fulfills your need. And so a lot of businesses online are built on this concept of meeting needs, but then completely ignore the concept of fulfilling needs. And fulfilling needs is actually where you build your reputation, you build results, you build momentum, right? It's actually fulfilling the needs. And so when you're running a business, you have to be aware of these two dualities, because it's like just meeting a need isn't enough. You have to fulfill the need, and when you fulfill the need is when actual people derive value, and then that's what gets them to do business with you over and over and over again.
Yeah. And so when I think about this actual and perceived value, and I think this is actually a really fascinating topic, and it's kind of exciting to think about. So what I think about is Elon Musk tweeting about Dogecoin, which is, a cryptocurrency, which is, I think, obviously made as a joke for those of you that know what it is. I don't know all the backstory and whatnot, but it's kind of this kind of joke currency, cryptocurrency that was created. And then just because it's funny, Elon Musk is like tweeting about it, but because he has so much reach and so much authority, he literally just tweeted, I think, a cover of Vogue magazine, but it said Doge, because, and there was a dog on it. So it was a funny little joke. He didn't say anything. He just tweeted the image. And of course, Dogecoin just skyrockets because all of a sudden there's all this attention on Dogecoin. So that's the perceived value, right? Nothing really changed as far as the value of Dogecoin, but because of the perception of the value, because Elon Musk tweeted about it, it increased automatically. So if you were going to buy Dogecoin, the price you pay is the actual value plus the perceived value. So before he tweeted and after he tweeted, the actual value didn't change, but the price you had to pay was completely different. It was way more expensive after he tweeted about it because the perceived value went up. And you see this a lot in the startup world, right? You take a company like Spotify, they've never made money. Like I had Spotify in 2011, I think, because I'm from Sweden and Spotify is from Sweden and they only opened it domestically at first. So I had it before anybody knew what the hell it was. And even then, at that time, they didn't even have the premium option where you could pay. It was only free. So it's really crazy. You have these companies like Spotify, they've never made money, not one quarter since they started, and they're valued at billions and billions and billions of dollars. So a lot of that is perception, right? What is the perceived value? And so you see it a lot in the startup world. You look at companies like WeWork and Uber as well. It's all about the actual value that they provide, but then you add all the hype around it and all the attention. And that's why, I think, Alan, you mentioned on one of our accelerator calls about how like celebrity founders, don't they usually like outperform other founders or something like that?
Oh yeah. There was this book I read where they did like this analysis of CEOs, and like it was like non-celebrity CEOs, like it was like 20 to 1 like performance, because like the non-celebrity CEO is just focused on working and getting the company right, whereas like the celebrity CEO will kind of put their ego first and put themselves first. And you guys see this, I'm not going to mention any names, like like these marketers out there running ads, and it's like there's their offer, there's their business, and then there's a picture of them on the ad. I'm like, nobody cares about you. They want the product. It's like they don't. It's like, unless they're like sexually attracted to them, there might be some value, but like there's nothing there. It's like get off the ad. So it's like you'll see this happening a lot, where like a guy is, for example, selling, I don't know, let's say a training on Facebook, right? Just I'm not putting anybody out there. It's just putting, it can be like training on Pinterest ads and Facebook, whatever, right? And here's this course, whatever. And like I, as an entrepreneur, it's like I want the value of the course, so the ad should communicate the value of the course, right? But instead, what ends up happening is like I see somebody's face there, right? And I'm just like, why are you on the picture? It's like I can't mentally deduct that you have anything to do with Facebook or the course or whatever, right? It's like, because like if it was like a fitness product, that'd be fine, because I'm like, okay, the dude is ripped, maybe that's the thing, right? But it's like if it's a Facebook thing, it doesn't matter what you look like, right? It's like the look of the person is irrelevant. And so a lot of people out there will put their face on stuff and they'll be like, my ads don't work. And I'm like, of course they don't work, because it's like you're putting yourself first, not the business first, and you're building this thing around your ego.
You don't have any perceived value.
Yeah, exactly. Even that. And you're building this thing around your ego, right? And it's like, it just doesn't click, And so like the self-ego based ads, I mean, look, they're not bad as far as like if you want to brand yourself and do all that stuff, but it's like, and there's the time and place for it. But don't focus on putting yourself out there first at the expense of the business, because that's going to cost the conversions and stuff like that, attracting the right people. And that's one of the components of scaling in the wrong direction, right? Or versus scaling in the right direction. Like you put for example, like you can let's say you go buy a Lamborghini or whatever, have a sick place, and you put that on the ads, and then it's like people that come in want the Lamborghini, they don't want to learn what you got, right? And so it's like you're getting a whole bunch of people who are into the car, the dream and everything, but then it's like that the stuff what you got is irrelevant. So you really have to be careful about that, right? And so so they did a study on that as far as CEOs goes, and it's like non-celebrity CEOs like beat the celebrity CEOs by quite a bit. I can't remember exactly what was the reason. But it was something to do with...
That was kind of against my point then, but it's still fascinating.
Yeah.
But so just one final thing on this is, one of the things that as I'm talking about this, I'm also realizing and predicting that, especially for those of you guys that are here live with us, what you're going to see is, so when we're building automatic clients and we're here shooting this video, all of our focus right now is on the actual value. Like that's the only thing that we can control right now, and that's the thing that's going to move the needle for us. So that includes, getting results for our customers and making everybody feel good, right? But then what you're going to see is once we've kind of built this machine and stuff, and you start paying attention to us, you'll probably start to see that we start doing things that are going to increase the perception of the value, hanging out with the right people. We talked about symbols of credibility, celebrity stuff. I don't know how much of that we're going to do because neither of us really are interested in being like a famous guru or whatever. But if there's that perception of, if there's the perceived value component to it, then there is value to that. And so one ways that you see this is if you guys watch a show called Undercover Billionaire. So Grant Cardone is on it, and he's trying to do these real estate deals and stuff that he has been doing with his celebrity name for a long time. And now he's a nobody. He has to pretend like he's somebody else. And all of a sudden, he doesn't have the perceived value anymore. And all of a sudden, he has to do all the legwork. He has to do all the things that he didn't have to do before. He has to go into meetings and actually convince people. And he can't rely on the perceived value that he has as a celebrity guru and whatnot. So it's really kind of a fascinating topic. And it's something to be considered if you are in business. Obviously, first of all, focus on the actual value, take care of your customers and get them results. But if you want to amplify the value of your company, how much money comes in, and all these things, perceived value is something to consider on that front.
But also perceived value can be also anchored into products, not just personal. Like there's a danger.
Absolutely.
There's a real danger in like architecting yourself as that leverage of value, right? Because like tomorrow, if you build, let's say for example, you built like $20 million a year business, right? It does really well. And the anchor of perceived value is you, right? And you having to show up and work. You don't really have a business. You have a very high paying job. And like the day you stop showing up, the day the business goes to shit, right? And so that's a real danger, right? Whereas like, for example, I'll give you a real good example. So like, in the SaaS world, in the software world, there's two different worlds, right? Like, so there's the internet marketing SaaS worlds, which is like, ClickFunnels, stuff like that, right? And then there's like, Active Campaign and stuff like that. And so, like if you go to Active Campaign, like, the CEO is not on it. Like, I don't know, they don't have courses or anything, right? But they're like a massive company. Like if you just look up Active Campaign, Chicago, like I think Chicago office, it's like sick, right? It's like huge, right? Huge company. And so AWeber is like a massive company. So there's all these massive companies, and like the owner of it, the guys that built it, they can step back and they can put somebody else to run it, and the business will continue to grow, right? But if you built a business on you having you as a person having leverage perceived value, and then the second you step away, that thing is going to collapse, right? And so, but there's nothing wrong with that. Like if that, like you derive, if you're out there and, I get a lot of value out of people admiring me, liking me, and, recognizing me, that's fine. Do that. You control your future. It's your choice, but you should just be aware that you want to have sustainable long-term leverage, because like one day, if you wake up, you're like, I'm 45 years old. I really don't want to get on video anymore. I don't want to guru anymore. I don't want to, get on Facebook and talk about this stuff anymore. And then you're like, but if I stop doing that, then it's like, I'm not going to make any money. Then it's like, holy shit, I scaled a business in the wrong direction all along, and it sucks. So you really have to be aware of that, And so
digital marketer was a good example of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like a lot of these, but it's interesting because this is like runaway demographics. Like it's like,
yes.
nobody sits there and is like, hey, I want to go, do this and this. It's just like, hey, this just made me money, so we should keep doing it. But nobody's like really thinking about it strategically in the sense of like, wait a minute, like what's going to happen like if we build this thing here, and it's like I have to show up every day and do that. And so it's interesting because like, The Rock, right? Like the actor The Rock, he has to show up every day and act in a movie, unless I'm sure he has some investments. He made a lot of money, but a lot of these guys have to show up, right? So like you got to build a business though that it runs and does extremely well without you showing up, And so like we have this saying where it's like, if you have a business that lives and dies by the ads, you're kind of screwed, right? And so like, but also on like the next evolution of that, it's like if you have to show up, you're screwed again. So it's like the key is to build a business where it does not live or die by the ads, and it also doesn't live or die whether you show up or not, right? You should be able to say, I don't want to work for 3 months. I'm going to go hop around Europe, and that's fine, right? So like my CPA, right? I was doing my taxes the other week, and he was telling me he's going to Europe for 3 months, and he has an awesome business where, huge business where he, doesn't have to show up. And I'm like, that's cool, And so that's really, really important. When you're scaling, a lot of people just think scaling one-dimensionally is just making money and stuff, which is fine, right? There's definitely to it, but it's like you're going to scale everything else, but you have to scale in the right direction. Otherwise, if you're scaling, like say a software company, you can be Active Campaign, or you can be, some other, guru-based software company where it's like all the stuff is there. And now there's ways like where you can kind of start off as a guru-based company, get the right attention, and move over into lateral markets and get the right kind of customers, like corporate clients and stuff like that. So there's many ways to skin a cat. Just want to make sure you guys are aware of this, right? So next up is optimize. Find what's working as it should. Fix it, scale, increase budgets, audience, and channels. So Robert, you tackle this one.
Sure. I mean, you kind of touched on it already, but when it comes to optimizing, that's all you're doing, right? You're looking at data and you're trying to, if you don't have data, you're trying to figure out how can I get data on this? Sometimes that's what you have to do. You have to understand that there's an important part of your business that's currently not being tracked, and then you're needing to figure out how can I actually track this? What is a metric that I can use to show me if this is working or not working? And so when you're looking at your data, you just have to have an idea of what the benchmarks are and what things should be doing. And then you just go through them one thing at a time. And then each time you fix something, typically, if you're building, we like to look at business as you're building this machine, right? So, one example of this would simply be, me adding one email after somebody buys our book that checks inside of Active Campaign, did they buy upsell 1 or did they not buy upsell 1? If they didn't buy upsell 1, send them an email with this little pitch, give them some value, and then send them a link to buy the upsell. So that's an example of like me going in there and doing a little bit of work, but it's a little bit of work that's going to improve the machine by 1%, but it's 1% today, tomorrow, the day after that, and so on. So if you just go into that, and this is why when we said the other day that running the business is where all the money is made, not in the creation of the business, this is what we mean. You build the thing and then you just go to work on it and you improve it 1% here, 1% here, 1% here, 1% here, and that's where things really start to compound and you go from not making money to making money. So that's on the optimization thing. It's not really rocket science, right? And then there's the scaling. So there's horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. So horizontal scaling would be, well, let's start with vertical scaling. So vertical scaling would simply be to basically do more of what you're already doing. So that would be like increasing budgets, right? So let's say you have an ad campaign on Facebook, it's doing pretty well. And then you're just going to take that same ad and you're going to maybe add some countries and increase the budgets. So that would be just doing more of the same. That's vertical. Then you have horizontal. So that would be things like adding new audiences, creating new ad campaigns with new audiences, new angles, new ad creatives, all these things, trying to find different things than the one thing that you're already doing that was working. So you're doing other things, new campaigns, new ad sets, all these things. And also go into different channels. So if you're only running on Facebook, maybe you pop over to YouTube or to LinkedIn and so on. So you're trying to find other sources of ideally underpriced attention where you can put your ads in front of people, they'll click it, go buy your stuff, and you make some money, right? So that's just kind of on a practical level how you actually scale, Anything to add, Alan?
That's a great point. Yeah, for sure. Let me pull up my notes. Okay, it's the next slide. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. Yeah, I mean, again, it's all about also like efficiency of scaling, because like what ends up happening is like as you scale, your numbers collapse, and yes. So typically like, when you're getting, 1 to 10, 20 customers a day, that's easy, right? But then it's like when you get to 50 to 80, the numbers start to collapse, and you get to 300, the numbers start to collapse. So it's like you got to have this like your economics real tight, so that as you keep growing, your numbers don't collapse, right? And so typically, I think like between 80, I think 87 or 85, like about 80 front ends a day to about 300 a day is like basically like the wobble, right? That's so that your numbers collapse. And then once you hit 300, it holds steady to like 1,000, right? So if you can get at 300, like 300 to 400 a day sales, then it'll hold steady to 1,000 sales, but you gotta keep your economics real tight, as you increase your budgets, because increasing your budget, it's interesting because like increasing your budget also increases your CPA and lowers your AOV, right? It's not the other way around. Most people think it's like just to increase, everything else is going to go up. It's like, no, it's like, expenses increase, profits decrease pretty quickly, and so you really have to focus on having the really strong economics to do it, right? And so let's go to the next slide. So the basic rule of thumb is scaling is like we focus on 10x, right? And so like if your book is $5, we focus on $50 AOV, right? That's what we aim at, right? And so far, like lately in the accelerator, we're getting people like $5 books are producing about $50 to $70 AOVs, which is really cool. Just because of some tweaks, we kind of help with people, but and so you want to basically run that. And so like the way you want to scale your offer is just basically in increments of your funnel, right? And so what I mean by that is like, for example, if everything adds up, like your front end, and your upsells is $300, basically there should be an ad cycle budget, right? So it's like you go in at $300, and the philosophy is like you just want person to buy your whole funnel once and pays for everything, and then the rest is free profit. And so using this model, we've had, I think, just maybe a small handful of days where we actually didn't make money, and the rest has been like, double or triple our money on the front end, And so you basically, increments of your funnel value, right? And so the rule of thumb is like, I don't know if we covered this, but I'll talk about it. It's not in the slides, but like MLTV, right? So most people focus on AOV, which is like average order value, right? Meaning like how much does a person buy on average? So for example, on a $5 book, your average order value can be $50, right? But then there's this seldom talked about concept called lifetime value. Lifetime value of a customer, meaning like if a customer stays with you for X amount of time, how much money do they spend, right? And that's fine too. But one thing nobody really talks about is MLTV, which is maximum lifetime value. And I've never heard anybody talk about it other than me. And basically maximum lifetime value is like if you were to like add everything up, like how much can they spend with you, right? And so most people don't really think about it because they're like, well, they can only spend like maybe $8,000 with us, right? Well, that's it. And then you're getting a percentage of that, right? So like, but like what you should do is like one of the first things I do with people that come in, they kind of have momentum, not newbies, but people that have momentum, is I say, okay, we got to architect your MLTV to be $100,000, right? And so the rule of thumb is like if you do everything right, like I mean, you really, you're doing SMS, you're doing like direct mail, you're doing webinars, you're doing presentations, you're doing like free trainings like this, you're in your group. You're communicating, you're offering value, your sales are tight and everything, you should be able to get 1/3 of the MLTV, right? And so, for example, on average over like a lifetime of the customer. So for example, let's say on average people stay with you 5 years, and then the MLTV is $100,000. So like if somebody's with you for 5 years, they can spend $100,000. They should be able to, you should be able to get $30,000 on average per client, like on a long enough timeline, right? If you do everything right. But I will say it's extremely difficult to do that. Like, I mean, you have to like machine everything down. Like you have to be like, retargeting ads. I mean, you really have to do everything right. So you basically can have like, 1/10 to 1/4. Like, so basically if your MLTV is like, let's say $100,000, if you half-ass it, whatever, it should be able to get 10 grand on average out of a person, right? Because what ends up happening is like, for every like 1,000 books you sell, you'll have one person in there who'll be like, I'll pay 100 grand to, for you guys to do everything for me, done, right? And the reason is like if you look at the franchise market, a lot of people will spend like $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to make like 80 grand a year in a job, which is kind of crazy, right? So you got to focus on your MLTV, and nobody really thinks about MLTV because the only limiter to how much money you can ask from people to sell is the amount of money that you have, the amount of goods and products and services you have to sell to them, right? So for example, if your highest price package is like $10,000. Well, guess what? Like your lifetime value of a customer cannot go beyond $10,000 because that's the highest thing you're selling, right? So you have to have like something huge there, like up to 100 grand, and so forth. So that way, it's like when somebody comes and you present it, somebody will buy it, right? And it just, in do numbers and probabilities, somebody will buy it. So you got to have the massive MLTV. And when you do that, then you can be like, well, it's fine. We can just pay, for example, $50 to get a $5 customer, and that $5 customer turns into a $5,000 to $10,000 sale. Then that $5,000 to $10,000 sale turns to a $50,000 sale, and then sometimes it turns into a $100,000 sale, and it works very, very well. Yeah, and that's basically the architecture of economics. Is so to kind of do a loop back to the one of the first calls we did with 7-Day Fast Start is, most people focus on the wrong metrics, right? Like metrics of ego, for example, how many people like me, what are the likes, etc. And you can't cache likes, and then they focus on conversions. Well, what's the conversions? Conversions are irrelevant because like if you lower something to like from 100, like so, there's copywriters out there. They'll say for every percentage I increase your conversions, you got to give me $10,000. Well, it's fine. I can just if you sell a $100 product, I'll go change it to $1, and then I'll increase your conversions by like 30%, and you owe me 30 grand, right? Very easy. It doesn't, like, conversions are irrelevant because like 1%, let's say 1% of a million is different than 1% of 100, right? So like percentage points are irrelevant. What matters is only AOV, right? Like average order values, because that's the only thing that can, equate out against CPAs, basically the cost per acquisition. I was gonna say something else. Yeah, and so one of the things with AOVs, it's an interesting thing because, like, for example, like we have a client in our accelerator, and he took his bump, right? So for example, here's how this works, right? And so like you go in there and you increase the bump value from like say $17 to $35, right? Because it's easy, right? And fine, that happens, and then you're like, okay, conversions went up, whatever, like on the bump, great. But then like his upsell pad stopped working because like people kind of allocated their money to the bump, and they're like, I don't want to spend $197 on this. I already spent like $50 here, right? You see how that works? So everything is connected as a whole. So when you're working on conversions, like you can increase the conversions of one component of the funnel, right? One component of the funnel, but then what ends up happening is like the secondary or third or fourth, fifth component of the funnel stops working. And so, that stops working, and then you can't really, you don't know why, right? And so then you're like, well, what the hell? And so like, for example, let's say you increase the bump, the upsells one stops working, then you're going up there, pulling your hair trying to make upsell one work, when all you really should have done is like looking at, the bump and fixing that, and the path fixes itself. So it's all connected. But anyway, that's what you got to do. Basically, it's interesting because like the closer you get to for free, the more scale you have, right? And so if you look at like Credit Karma, right, it's free, it has massive scale. Google is free, it has massive scale. If you look at Facebook, it's free, it has massive scale. Like, so the closer you get down to the free point, it has massive scale. But also, interestingly enough, the closer you get to free, the harder it is to make economics work, right? So like, for example, Google, is free, but, they got extremely lucky in the sense of they could do advertising. They just had the right product with the right model. But like, if you give away your product for free, then it's like, not only are you getting a non-transactional relationship, you also have to monetize that. But you can scale that. So like, you can scale this out to the moon. And so a lot of people doing free books, etc., there's this illusion of success because they're getting all these people to get the free book and the conversions are high, but then like they're not really panning out on the back. And I can tell you, like, I had so many people come to me. They're like, I have a garage full of these books I printed, and it's like, how do I sell them? I'm like, well, it's like, you can't give them away for free, right? And so what we try to do is get down closer to the free. Because we're really not after, the $5 price point. We're after you buying into our idea, right? And then like, basically the idea is the seed of future transactions, the conceptual framework. And then that's what allows you to scale, right? And basically you pay us to acquire it. So, I got this concept from Agora, right? So Agora, what they do is they'll sell these newsletters for like $97 a year, right? And so you see this video, whatever, VSL, and you buy this newsletter for $97. It seems like a great deal, right? It's $97 a year. But really what you're doing is you're paying them $97 to print, ship, and market to you for the next 12 months. And so what you did was like, not only did you self-filter and become a lead to them, right? You self-filtered and you showed intent that you're a lead to them. You also paid them $100 to send you 12 promos in guise of newsletters for the next 12 months, right? And then that's how they're a $2 billion a year company, because they run these offers, and then they take that $100 and they allocate it to printing. Like they'll send you stuff in the mail, like envelopes and pictures and letters and emails and everything. They allocate that money to get more money out of you, right? But what most people in our market do is like, they'll get that money from the customer, and they'll be like, I'm gonna go, live that lifestyle in Thailand or something, whatever, right? Instead of looking at it strategically, right? And so what we do is like, we allocate it so people self-filter, and then instead of Agora, like instead of Agora basically saying, allocating the, for the shipment of direct mail, because we don't do much of that, we do things such as this, the 7-day fast hour, free trainings and stuff like that. So the mechanism, the machine that we build filters people, they pay for that filtering, they come in, and then we just ascend them up. So that's it for the scaling and the summer recap. Robert, you want to do this?
Yes, I do. First of all, if you guys have questions, those of you that are live, now would be the time to line them up in the chat, and then we'll stick around for a little bit to do Q&A. And if you don't have any questions, you can think about your main takeaway from today as I go through the summary, and then you can go post it in our Facebook group. Right, the big takeaways really, I think for a lot of you is going to be this idea that when you scale, everything scales, which means when you're going out there and if you're just spending $100 a day and you're breaking even, chances are when you scale things up, it's not going to work. You're going to need to have slightly better numbers than that to be able to make it work. Pace your scaling of your offer. Make weekly decisions, not daily decisions, especially with Facebook. You cannot, it's like a sleeping baby. Like I said, you cannot be fucking with it too much. You just want to make sure that you look at the data, make your decisions, and then you let things sit for like a day, 2 days, 5 days, 7 days, and then you look at the data again. It's about scaling in the right direction. You really have to be mindful of which direction you're going in, because all of the things that you're doing, we talked about the messaging, the baits that you're using, the name of your book or the name of your course, like whatever it is, all these things, they all lead to somewhere in the future. And you need to consider what that point is and if that's a place that you want to go to. And if not, you might want to have to consider doing things a little bit differently, changing the name or the audience, whatever, right? Then there's this idea of the economic engine. Now, every single one of us has the power to go build a business and scale it, or to go get famous if that's what you want. You have this economic engine that you can build. You follow the AC model, and then you use advertising to go out there, purchase attention, convert that attention into money, which is kind of like fuel, right, for attention. And then you can keep going through that loop over and over and over again, and you're going to end up building a business that spits out money that you can put in your pocket at the end of the day. And so it might be hard for you to go out there and compete with The Rock, but you can do your best.
But one thing interesting I want to say, competing with The Rock, it's like, once upon a time, right? Like you had these actors, right? Like I don't know, I like, for example, I new guy competing with the Rock is Chris Pratt, right? Like he's kind of like, he has the economic engine behind him, and so he's taking a lot of attention. So yeah, there's no permanence. Anything can be altered because of the economics.
Yep, 100%. As you scale, your system has to be load bearing, otherwise it'll collapse. So, as you go out there and scale, if you have these weak points in your business, then they're going to get exposed. Might be certain team members, might be the technology that you're using, maybe your hosting sucks, like whatever your weak points are, they're going to get exposed when you scale. So consider everything that you're doing. And if you know that something is not load bearing, then you should probably fix it before you go and scale. And I remember hearing that Tim Ferriss basically stopped recommending products and services because he had such a big audience that each time he mentioned something, he would just fucking crash their website, and the support couldn't keep up with all the demand. And so a product that was crushing it ended up getting really negative reviews and stuff because they were just completely overwhelmed with all this, all the sales and attention that they got just from, Tim Ferriss mentioning them on his podcast. So that's what we mean by that. The idea of actual and perceived value, go out there and focus on actual value first. Make sure that you're getting results for your customers. But once you have that in place, start looking at perceived value and what you can do to kind of manipulate the overall value of your business, because it can be manipulated. The actual value is much, much harder to change. Optimizing, look at what's not working. And if you're not able to measure something, figure out a metric that you can measure that's going to give you an indication. And then you can fix things as you go. And vertical scaling, horizontal scaling, vertical scaling is just doing more of what you're already doing that's working. And horizontal scaling would be trying other things, going to different channels, creating new campaigns, new angles, and all these things. And then the 10x idea of the front end, and this idea of scaling in the increments of the whole cart value. So if your whole sales funnel is $200, then that's the increments of scaling that you should be trying, at least in the beginning. Then you could probably go a little bit more aggressive as you go, and as Facebook and so on gets more data.
Or you can double, like for example, $400 or whatever, like, but in increments, because the idea is like you want somebody to buy your whole, funnel, and then it pays for itself.
For the whole thing. Yeah. Exactly. And that's kind of the summary. I think we have one or two questions, so we could look at that and action steps. I mean, if you're at that point, go out there and have fun scaling. But for now,
the biggest action step I have for everybody here, and what you guys should do is you guys should go on a piece of paper or in whatever tool you use, and draw a line left to right, and put month 0 on the left, and then put 12 months on the right, and then draw another line zip 12 to 24, and then 24 to 36, like go into 12-month increments, right? You should have like 3 years, and on top of that sheet you should put like $100,000, and then in each you need to plot out exactly what you can sell them to add to 100 grand, right, within that 12 months. And then after you plot out what you can sell them for 100 grand after 12 months, you got to plot out, okay, what am I gonna do, what activities am I gonna partake in to sell them the 100 grand, right? So an example would be day 0, $5 book, $10 book with the upsell, right? That's one, right? Day 10 or day 10 to 30, $5,000 to $10,000 accelerator, right? And then it's like day 30 to 50, it can be like, $30,000 a year mastermind, right? Then it's like 50 to 90, it can be like, a $50,000 done for you, right? So in fact, if you can have $1 million worth of stuff to sell, that'd be even actually better, right? And so it'd be better. Yeah. So basically, ML, you want to compress it, right? Because so we'll get to the questions in a second. And so you want to basically have as much, like between $100,000 and $1 million worth of stuff for you to sell them, right? And doesn't mean like $1 million item, but it's like if you add everything up, you should add to that. And so what'll happen is, like on a long enough timeline, if you just focus on generating, cultivating a relationship, offering value and stuff, and just showing them stuff, then they will, somebody will buy the stuff there on that timeline, and then MLTV will go up. And so yeah, basically like you should focus on over a 12-month period. It depends on. So Sage here is asking, he says, just to clarify, the MLTV is over 12-month period, or is that 12-month? Yeah. So basically, it just depends on your like customer cycle. Like, so in some markets, for example, like the relationship market, right? The current customer cycle is like 12 months or so, right? And so like, you should basically hurry up and try to maximize MLTV. In some markets, it can be like 24 months. It can be 36 months, right? But the point is to have like at least $100,000 to $1 million worth of possible stuff they can buy from you, right? And then, you got to just plot out like on a timeline, like, okay, when am I going to sell them what? And then basically diligently, chip away at it, right? Like, okay, this month we're going to do this month we're going to do that, right? And when you do that, the numbers start to add up, right? Because what ends up happening is, like, let's say, for example, you're 6 months in, right? And in 6 months in, you still have people buying the $5 book, but now people are buying your $30,000 a year masterminds, right? And then like maybe in 8 months in, people are buying your, $5 book, and then you got people still buying your $30,000 a year mastermind, and then you have something like maybe a $75,000 done for you program, right? They're buying that. And so like you'll have this like compound effect of things happening where people just buy and buy and buy stuff, right? And what ends up happening is like you get to a point where you're like, well, it doesn't really matter if we make any money on the book because we know how the numbers are going to back out over here, right? And then you have something great. And then with enough economics, what's really cool is like you can hire people to run a lot of stuff for you so you don't have to show up, and so that's another cool thing. But yeah, you really have to be careful about the biggest threat to economics is that scaling in the wrong direction, right? Those two things, like so scaling in the wrong direction. Like, so if you build a great business with great economics, and then the other thing is like the other threat is just building it around you. Because if one day you wake up and you're like, I can't work anymore, I don't want to do this anymore, and it's like, well, fuck, it's like I got to close this business down, right? But if you build it and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go do something else, and you can just hire a CEO or whatever to run it, and that's cool too, right? So that's important. So let's answer some questions, Robert. Other than that, what else we got here?
Yeah, so the first question is creating a $5 ebook on the front end good for any brick and mortar store? I'll give my 2 cents on that and you can chime in. So it's not going to work for every type of store, but in a lot of cases it would, right? And the reason I say that is because I used to have an animation studio where we actually did animations for companies in Sweden. It was one of my first businesses. And that turned out to, I tried everything. Like I tried to figure out what's a front end offer, like information offer that I could put on the front of this to scale things up. And I realized that it was one of those services where, we talked about in one of the other videos where people either want the done with you, where, you consult with them, or they want it done for you. But there was no real scenario in that animation business where people wanted to learn how to create an animated video. So we were basically unable to sell information on the front end. There was nothing that we could sell that was going to attract the same person who was also likely to actually buy the done for you. It was like a completely different audience, right? So with that said, I think sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes you might just have to get creative. Like if you think about a store about, interior design, for example, that might at first glance might seem like, oh, how can I sell information? But then you can quickly realize that there is probably some stuff about, the latest trends and like how to think about decorating your house. And like, there's probably a bunch of theories and philosophies and cool ideas that you could share about interior design that you could sell an ebook. And then once you have that customer data, you could get them to come show up in your brick and mortar store. So I think it's not going to work in every single case, but in most cases, probably you're going to be able to do that. Anything to add, Alan?
No, it's a good answer. It just depends. I mean, it works for some, it doesn't. I mean, we have a guy in our program, like he owns like a baseball training facility in St. Louis, right? And like, so it came in and basically like we had to like, that's one of our out of scope clients. Like we had to kind of like do something different with him. But the idea was basically to like create a free boot camp for people to come in and they're using our scripts and stuff to close them. And so that works too, so it just depends how you want to architect.
It doesn't have to be information that you're selling on the front end.
Yeah, it can be like an event or an activity or something that you use for them to show up, and like so he's using that and like getting people to show up, and then we help them change some economics, like the baseball fitting. So where basically like he charges X amount per month, right? And then like the they give away like a $500 baseball, whatever, but really the person pays for it. They just lose money on the front month and they get them into like a 2-month, 3-month, 5-month contract, whatever. So it works really well. So just moving chips around, But yeah, so Jeff Miller asked something here. He says, have you ever done $199 a week to $100 a week offer? Typically, yeah. I mean, I've had experiences with that. Like when I was, doing consulting and stuff, it's like you basically like on the, typically it's like you get people that, like, so there's this barrier, right? So, if you have like I say a $3,000 thing, you can say, how much does that come out to 3,000 divided by, let's say, 10 weeks, that's $300 a week, right? And so you get people on, they'll pay $300, and then what you do is like a week or two, and you're like, hey, do you just want to like pay the rest of this? So it's like, you're not dragging. And a lot of people, like I think 70 or 75% of people will upgrade for a full pay if you're doing a weekly split, But the weekly split is basically to get them over the hump, because there's this concept called chunk size, right? And it's like chunk size is like about like how much information somebody can absorb at once. So you go from general to specific, but there's also a chunk size in terms of like a financial commitment, right? And so with chunk size, it's like if you have like say a $5,000 to $10,000 program, like a lot of people would go in at that program if it was smaller chunk size, meaning like if it was like $300 a week or $500 a week, because that's what they can kind of mentally cope with, right? But
mentally, and the money might replenish from a paycheck or whatever. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. But also I think it's a lot more mental than that, because like everybody has credit, so everybody can use credit cards. And so like they're just not willing to commit to that chunk size that much, right? And so like the higher up you go, like, selling 20, 30, 40, $50,000 deals, you deal with chunk size a lot, right? Because people are they can't chunk that much out, And so it's like, you really have to be aware of that. And like, if you can figure out like the chunk size of your audience, then you can, you can maximize the perfect, equilibrium of like, what to charge them. And so like, I know like in Facebook groups where organic, like $3,000 chunk size seems to be, does pretty well. Whereas like on paid ads, $5,000 to $10,000 works really well. So you have to figure that out, Let's see what else.
So the next question is, wouldn't selling a $5 book for $27 or something attract richer or more qualified customers and raise the average order value? So one interesting thing that we've tested is, different pricing points. And what magically seems to happen is whatever you adjust your price to, the cost per acquisition is going to adjust accordingly with whatever platform you're using. So it's not that you're going to change the price and then all of a sudden you're going to start making a bunch of profit, but because of whatever price change you do, typically you're going to have an equal change in your CPA. So if you start charging 27, then all of a sudden, if you go from 5 to 27, then all of a sudden magically your CPA goes from 5 to 27 as well. So you have to really consider things outside of that. And what I mean by that is, we tried a $37 book and then we went to a $5 book and we looked at the data. And one of the data points that was really fascinating was that even from that pretty small change, in my opinion, $37 to $5, the big data point that was interesting was mobile purchases skyrocketed. They went up by 44%. So a lot of people did not want to buy a $37 book from their phone, but a lot more people were willing to do that at $5, which is really interesting. So you have to look at things outside of just the price point. And also, if you look at that $5 and $27 in the grand scheme of things, it's not really a big difference. Like a $27 thing, a lot of people can still afford a $27 ebook. So you're not going to be filtering out, poor people by charging $27 as opposed to $5.
Yeah, I mean, typically what ends up happening is like there is like a inflection point where numbers do start to matter, and that's at $97. So like the typical scenario, like if you're running like $97 front end, then it's easier to get people into the $1,000 program, and then from there it's easier to get people in the $10,000 program. So like 97,000 to 10,000 is like the optimal thing, right? But what ends up happening is like you have your back end and stuff, everything has to be really machine down so it can work, and so with the $5 thing you just have a broad spectrum of acquisition, where it's like you're getting people that would pay the 97, you're getting people that would pay the $5, you're building a list, you're building a Facebook group, you're building an audience, you're building a reputation, you're getting a lot more data, you're spending a lot less money. Like we can spend $20 and we know $50 we know if it's going to work or not, but at a $97 offer, you might have to go throw a $500 at it to start, to get that engine going, and so it just depends, I mean, $27 fine, it can work. $12 it'll work, but anything under, like I would say up to like $5 to $50 is kind of the range you want to play with, and so the lower the price goes, the more customer, more velocity you get. The higher the price goes, the less velocity you get, and then your testing starts to kind of get harder, right? Because you have to spend more money.
Yeah. So the next question is really interesting. Deborah, who's a PhD, says, I'm a psychotherapist. I have a book called Cheap Advice. It's for people who don't think they need a therapist. I would like for it to be my $5 book. What should be the first thing that I should do?
Change the title.
Yeah, well, that's one thing for sure.
Well, the reason you want to change the title is because like that requires a huge cognitive load for me to figure out what you're trying to
trying to say.
Exactly. Yeah. Like what's the end benefit? Like cheap advice is like kind of like, ooh, that's kind of like not good. And also you anchor the word cheap in there, and then it's like, you get people that kind of like resonate with their word.
Yeah,
right?
like so Deborah gives cheap advice, you don't want that to be the anchor.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so like you got to come up with like a disruptive idea and then derive the title from that, and so I think we have a video here on how to name offers.
Day
so
2.
Watch that. Yeah, day 2. But you want to do that. And $5 is fine, $10 is fine, whatever. So that's the first thing I would do, Deborah. I would do that. And then the second thing I would do is I would aim it at a market. Like, who is this for? Is it for men, women, what age, what life circumstance? Is it people that got divorced? Is it people that are depressed? Is it people that are dealing with COVID stress? Is it people that are, what are they dealing with? What's the end benefit? So you really got to kind of like figure out what it's angled at.
Which direction do you want to scale in?
Yeah, exactly. And what market to aim at? That's really important. So here's a question here. And the price point is the price point of $5 ebook principle applicable to all countries? Yeah, actually it is. Yeah, like I mean, we ran ads in the Philippines and other countries. We did really, really well with it. So the only difference between other countries is the back end is not as easy to get because, like, due to lower incomes, it's harder to get money out of people. So you got to be aware of that. So here's another question: What about yoga or other exercise? These products sold recently for $30 off, or how does this model works? Same thing. I mean, it's just price, right? The basic idea is like, the reason we go for lower price isn't because a lower price, is because it allows us to make more money later. So it's like you get more money and more people in the front, which means more people will take a bite at the upsell. You get more people in the group, you get more people on the list, you get more people to watch a 7-day fast start, you get more people to watch your theory course, you get more people to implement your stuff, you get more testimonials, you get more case studies, you yada yada yada, right? And so it's like basically it's just about acquisition, right? And so it's like if you can acquire them, if on YouTube, for example, if you're running offers on YouTube, VSLs and price point of 27 to 97 seems to do really well, right? And so like, if you're gonna run there, you got to kind of like look at those economics, But on Facebook, these economics are king, as far as I know, they work really, really well. And then just ascending people and moving them along the path, the path. Yeah. Any other questions, guys?
Good stuff. And with that, this is the end of the 7-day fast start. So any parting words, Alan, before we
Yeah, one
sign
second.
off?
There's one more question. It says, but it's difficult to think about 10K update with sports. No, it's not. And so, like for example, like we have a client, right? He does like baseball training. Like he's a baseball coach, right? And so what he does is like he came to us and he's still like gonna do a book, but then like I came up with this other thing for him, which is this other model, right? So he runs ads to like a free training camp, right? And then we asked like, okay, who is it? It's like what zip codes, whatever. So we just found zip codes that have more money, whatever. He's targeting that. He's putting them into boot camps, and then it's like $500 a month. But then he sells packages, right? So it's like a yearly package of $6,000. And so, like, if you're in a country, right, you want to do like, for example, soccer training, right, or whatever, and the boot camp for soccer training is like $500 a month of twice a week. That's $6,000 a year, and so you can do like it's not too far off $10,000. So anything can be sliced up, whatever. And so the biggest set of parting words I have is like to kind of like look around and just kind of like a lot of people have limiting beliefs in the sense of like what they can charge and what people should pay them for what they should pay them, right? And like it took me a long time to kind of get around to kind of getting really comfortable with high ticket, and now I'm like too comfortable with high ticket, right? And so to me, it's like selling a $5,000 to $10,000 program is like, I mean, I could do it in my sleep, right? It's like crazy, right? But if you look around, for example, Louis Vuitton, people are paying $5,000 to $10,000 for a purse, right? People are paying $1,000 to $2,000 for phones. There's shoes out there that cost
digital art for $69 million. Let's not forget.
Yeah, exactly. And like then there's shoes that sell for $2,000. Like Kanye West shoes. Like when they sell out, people go pay whatever. Like if you go on StockX.com and you can see the price of shoes or hats, right? I have a local buddy here. He pays like $250, $300 for a hat, like a stupid hat. He'll pay $300 for, right? There's so many of these examples. So many of these examples are just like money being spent. Like there's people selling sheds for like $80,000, like little sheds in the back for like and there's one for him, one for her, and there's like dog houses that are selling for like $25,000 with like air conditioning and stuff. And so people are spending a lot of money. But the thing is, it's like if you have this limiting belief that it's like how the hell do I get somebody to give me $10,000? It's not really an issue of how the hell do I get somebody to give me $10,000. It's more like an issue of limiting beliefs because you wouldn't give $10,000 for that, but you're not your customer, right? And so it's like, that's funny. Yeah, I should actually. So this Adrian says, could you sell a package of you in cases for inspiration? Yeah, that's one thing I do on the sales call. I do like I inject people with like shit ton of momentum, inspiration. They come in like fucking burning up, wanting to do it. That's what I'm really good at, and that's what I'm doing right here. But yeah, it's like all this money is being spent on like crazy stuff. Like people are buying watches. It's funny because like if you look at like 20 years ago, like a Rolex was kind of the expensive watch at like $5,000 to $10,000. Now it's like $15,000 to $20,000 for a Rolex. People are buying watches like for $300,000. Like what is that? The mill watches, and it's like there's all this money like fucking being printed all the time and floating around. So it's like, why not go get some? It's like, why not go get some? It's like, who cares? It's like we're living in like a special time, right? Where it's like you can create shit out of thin air, right? You can put it on the internet, copy and paste, and then sell stuff, replicating it over and over, like from your home, from your laptop. You don't have to go, rent the brick and mortar. You don't have to do anything. It's like you need like a laptop. Doesn't matter. It doesn't be a good laptop. I made my first $1 million, guys. I made I bought a Dell in college from this guy Ben, right? And it was a 14-inch Dell computer. It was missing 2 keys. I bought it for $100. I shit you not. It was like 14 like inch screen.
Which keys were missing? Do you remember?
I don't know. I think like let me see. I think the J or whatever. It was like it was missing 2 keys, and it was so fucking slow. Like literally, like you open up Photoshop, and like you click a button, and it would like you can go get some coffee and come back, and it would like do the thing, right? But I made $1 million off that, right? Like I made $1 million on that laptop, and I didn't have much, right? And yeah, and it's like there's all this money being made, and it's like kind of like weird, right? And so the thing to realize is like nobody's out there spending money they go make. It's all fucking credit. Everybody's buying everything on credit, paying it later, right? Like the Federal Reserve's interest rates are 0, right? Like the housing market's on fire. People are buying all sorts of shit. Like like another point about like money being people spending money like like 10 years ago, like Mercedes S-Class was like I think like 80 grand, right? And I had one. I bought one. When did I buy one? Last year, I think. I bought one last year, yeah. And it was like $120,000. Now now Mercedes S-Class 120, and like new ones be like 140. So like, you know, and car leases are like $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Like, it's like, why not? $10,000 is nothing to charge for shit. It's literally nothing. Like when you really start looking at it, it's like, oh wow, it's like nothing. And so once you change your belief and attitude about it being nothing, then you give yourself permission to go ask for it. And then when you go ask for it, what ends up happening is like you're gonna probably suck like the first few times. Like you're not gonna be good. I wasn't good the first few times. Like I fumbled, I fucked up, and I fumbled and fucked up because I felt uncomfortable asking for it. And the reason I felt uncomfortable asking for it because I didn't truly believe in the stuff I was selling. And then like I was like, wait a minute, this shit really helps people. It gets people results. Fucking amazing. It's like, let's go. And now it's like I think of it as what we sell really cheap. Like, and so like right now it's like, you know, I had a guy yesterday talking to him. He's like, oh no, join your stuff. How much is it? I'm like 6,500, and it's probably gonna go up. And he's like, oh my god, that's really cheap, because everybody else is like at $8,000 to $10,000. And so it's like you have to, like, that's why we preach stacking value, stacking so much value. So when somebody comes on your call, you're like, you have this, you know, sub communication. It's like you're crazy not to do this, because it's like it's so much value. I'm gonna get you the result. It's like, why not, right? But if you don't believe in your product and the value, and you're selling something weird and you can't get people results, you're gonna, you know, have this internal conflict, and it's gonna be really, really hard. But I think that's the biggest reason like people don't really do this, is because there's these like conflicting beliefs about, you know, money. And it's like, it's really, I mean, you know, they just printed like $4 trillion last year, and now they're gonna print 2 more trillion. So it's like $6 trillion out of thin air, right? Like just print it, right? It's gonna fuck everything up due to inflation, but that's not the point here, right? The only thing you can really do is to go get more money. And yeah, it's cool. And it doesn't matter how famous you are. It doesn't matter how good you look, how bad you look, if you have bad teeth or a big nose, you know, if you're fat or skinny, tall or short, you know, whatever you are, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Because you know why? Because Facebook doesn't give a shit. It's like, to them, you know, a dollar from somebody tall is the same as dollar from somebody fat. They don't care, right? And there's examples of, you know, tall people, short people, ugly people, pretty people, all making money. And it's like, nobody gives a shit, you know. So it's like, go out there, you know, get some, you know, put your shit out there. And if somebody doesn't like you, that's their problem. It's funny. I had a buddy of mine, Dale. He had this thing. He has this famous saying. He says, he's like an NLP grandmaster, and he has this thing. He says, you know, if somebody has a problem with you, well, that's just their problem, right? And I'm like, man, what a great way to like spin it. So like when you see somebody, you know, talking shit on ads or in a Facebook group or whatever, it's like, oh man, that person has a problem, but well, that's too bad. That's their problem. I guess they should go deal with it, right? And it completely just like, we go, oh, doesn't matter, fuck off, right? And so, yeah, it's cool. You're in control. You know, you can kick people off like I did on the day 2 because the guy was annoying, and you know, you can get rid of people on your ads. You can choose who you want to work with. You can help people. You can change lives. You can live anywhere in the world. You can do whatever the hell you want, and you should you don't take it for granted. I'll tell you that much. So my last parting words that I have for you is I've been doing this shit since 2004, doing it a long time, right? And until maybe like 2018, I took it for granted. Like between 2014 and 18, all I did was travel. Like I just traveled to the Caribbean, and I just ran this webinar, and we did really well. You know, I just traveled, and I took it for granted. I didn't realize the skill set I had was so fucking good and special until I started doing consulting, and I was like, damn, like, you know, all these famous gurus are paying me a lot of money, like, you know, some paid me up to 100 grand to help them, you know, blow their businesses up. And I'm like, damn. And then like when we started doing this offer, I'm like, holy shit, we're doing something that nobody else can do. And then it was like, in the automatic clients, it was like, holy shit, I'm getting results for people that like nobody else can get. And it's like, man, this is, so I took my skill set for granted. So like the only thing I have to say to you guys, don't take it for granted. Just go fucking do it. And if it fails, I mean, you don't have a failure, right? It never fails. It's just like you have a component problem. Like if you drive a car down the road and a tire blows out, the car is not bad. It's just fix the tire and the car goes, right? And so like one of the things in the accelerator that we do is we look at component problems. So if you have a business that's not making money, it's not the whole business that's bad. It's just a component of that business is not bad. And you just got to figure out what component, right? So if you need help, post in a Facebook group and say, my business sucks. And we'll say, what sucks about it? Is it the back end? Is it the front end? Is it the ads? You know, is it the you know, the people getting results? What sucks? Like, what's the component that sucks? And then all you have to do is go fix that component. You know, if it's the front end, fix the front end. If it's the ads, fix the ads. If it's the back end, fix the back end. If it's the sales, fix the sales. Like, you don't have a holistic problem in a business. You have a component. But most people, when they put out a business out there, what happens is they say, if shit doesn't work, fuck it, I'm done, right? And they never look at it, where it's like, that's like you driving like a sick car down the road and tire blows. You're like, oh, fuck this car, I'm out, and go walk, right? And you're walking home. Well, I could just come fix the tire and I got your car, you know? So I have a funny story about this. You know, I go down to the Caribbean, and I like to go to St. John, right? And I charter a yacht when I go, right? And I chartered this yacht whenever I go, and like basically the yacht takes me all over Caribbean to different islands, like, you know, whatever. And so I was there and I was talking to the captain. I was like, "What's the story with this yacht? How'd you get it?" Right? So turns out him and his brother were you know, working in Charleston and a boat yard, like building yachts, right? And so these like 4 attorneys, like very, very like well-to-do attorneys, came down, and they said they had this yacht built by them. And so they built a yacht, and they're like, you know, the captain said, like, "Look, guys, you can't sail this thing down to the Caribbean in November or something because it's hurricane season, right? Or whatever." And so they're like, nah, we'll do it. So, you know, they go down there, sail it, and the hurricane hits, and like basically have to call the Coast Guard. Coast Guard saves them. They abandon the ship, right? And basically, the ship was out there, you know, floating around the ocean for like a week. And so the captain had a homing beacon on it, and so he knew where exactly it was. So he went and got the boat. Him and his brother got the boat, tugged it down to St. John, and they fixed it. And then you started doing this like yacht charter. So they'll, you know, you pay them and then just basically, you know, sail around the Caribbean. It's pretty cool. And you know, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, it's a whole ocean out there. So it's like, you know, there's all these different people that like abandoned boats and businesses, and you can just go look at what they're doing, what they did wrong. You can kind of fix it, and you can kind of scale it. And so you can, you know, or you can build your own. You can do whatever you want. But with that in mind, I am done talking. We scheduled this to be 1 hour, ended up being 1.5 hours because we're incapable of limiting ourselves. And then, Robert, do you have anything to say before I close it off?
No, that's a great way to end it. So I just want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you around. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, make sure you do that and go post your biggest takeaway. And that's it.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Have a good one.